Hello, I'm Brett Moss, and you're watching The Defining Moment for Creating a Culture of Conscience. Our guest today is Dr. David Gruder. He is the award-winning author of The New IQ, How Integrity Intelligence Serves You, Your Relationships, and Our World. Dr. Gruder is a licensed clinical psychologist and co-founder of the Association for Comprehensive Energy Psychology. Among his academic degrees, he has a doctorate from the California School of Professional Psychology at San Diego. David and his wife Lori live in San Diego, California, and this is David Gruder's third appearance on our program. Dr. David Gruder, welcome back to The Defining Moment. I'm so happy that you've joined us here again today.
I'm delighted to be back with you.
Thanks for coming. Our topic today is true patriotism, restoring integrity to the fabric of our society and nation. And I'd like to begin by inviting you to share a defining moment from your own life.
The one that I'm going to talk about actually occurred on 9/11/2001. I was born and raised in New York, in and around the New York City area. And I happened to be back in New York to help my mother prepare her house to be sold when 9/11 occurred. And it was a very, very powerful experience for, I think, most all of us, but it was a particularly powerful experience for those of us who were in the vicinity of Ground Zero.
Sure.
And on the 1 week anniversary, a week after the attack, I went down to Ground Zero because I wanted to spend a couple of hours praying on the site, at the site, to offer healing energy to the physical space and the souls of people who had been so profoundly impacted by this event. Yeah. And somehow, and I still don't know to this day how this happened, but I managed to get past all of the security folks into an area where you could only be if you had one of those special badges, and was able to sit there and pray and meditate and offer healing energy without being questioned or approached once by any of the security people. Following doing that, I roamed around Manhattan because I had noticed something really remarkable had occurred in that week following the 9/11 attacks. There were these street-side shrines that started to pop up spontaneously in all different locations, not only in Manhattan, but throughout the New York metropolitan area, but they were most concentrated in Manhattan, since that's where the attacks occurred. And these shrines had photographs of people, have you seen so-and-so, that people were trying to locate that were in the vicinity of the World Trade Center when the attacks occurred. But there were also candles and healing messages, and there were a lot of letters that people had written and had posted on these shrines. And I took hours after spending time at Ground Zero, going from street-side shrine to street-side shrine to read those letters. And what I found was that over 90% of the letters were letters of reconciliation, letters of teachability, letters from New Yorkers who had been the most impacted by these events, saying, we need to find out how this could have happened. What role did we not know that we might have played in helping this happen? And it wasn't beating ourselves up or anything like that. It was searching on the part of people who had been the most traumatized in an attempt to find some level of self-responsibility, even while it was clear that the perpetrators needed to be contained.
Yes.
Less than 10% of the letters and messages that I read at these spontaneous street-side shrines were letters about let's go nuke the SOBs. When American foreign policy, shortly after that, only focused on revenge and punishment and destruction.
Seeking justice.
Well, they called it seeking justice, but it was more than just seeking justice because of what it left out. The containment was necessary.
Yeah.
But what was left out of the foreign policy was any willingness to look at our unintended because that's what it was, unintended part in helping a climate develop in the world that would have fed the kind of fanatical terrorism that would have led to these kinds of horrendous attacks. Yes. In that moment, something snapped in me. And I realized that as a psychologist, politics and negotiations have notoriously left out, they've omitted the wisdom of psychology from their understandings and their interventions. And I had spent my career working with individuals and mentoring leaders and assisting companies in developing their own effectiveness and developing the kinds of climates that nurtured employees and that nurtured profitability in an ethical, integrity-centered way. I realized in the aftermath of 9/11 and having been there that I was not going to be patriotic if I didn't step up and start speaking about what I know to a broader audience in order to have broader impact in the world than I had ever allowed myself to conceive of the possibility of doing.
Yeah, very clear. Thank you so much for sharing that with us. I really appreciate that. What motivated you to create the Integrity Stimulus Plan for America?
Well, initially what I was motivated to do was to write a document called the Declaration of Global Responsibility, which was an integrated response to fanaticism disorder, which is the psychological disorder that, in my judgment, leads to terrorism, which is available on for people who want that. It's just available for free distribution at thenewiq.com. But what that led to was my writing the book, The New IQ, which is about a complete master plan for restoring integrity in our world, both self-integrity and relationship integrity and societal integrity. What that then led to was my realizing I needed to provide something as a public service. And the public service that I wanted to do was based on my seeing over and over again in all of the keynotes and training workshops that I do around the country and beyond, really around the world, but particularly in this country, people were saying to me, we know that there's a massive integrity problem here. We know that integrity problems have directly caused our economic meltdown, have caused political corruption, have caused problems in our business community, have caused problems in our relationships with each other, have caused problems in people's relationships with themselves. And we want to do something about it, but we don't know what to do. And I realized that there's a new silent majority today. The old silent majority was active and came into existence in the late 60s, early 70s, but there's a new silent majority today. This silent majority is the majority of people who, regardless of their faith orientation and regardless of their political orientation, they are fed up with the massive integrity deficits that are directly responsible for all of our major problems today. And so what I realized through interacting with the people that I was doing these keynotes and training programs for was that what they were waiting for was a vision, a master plan that they could get behind in bringing about a restoration of integrity in this country and around the world.
Yeah.
And it was with that in mind that I developed the Integrity Stimulus Plan.
Excellent. Thank you very much. Please give us some insight into what you refer to as America's mission statement.
Well, this is very interesting. America's mission statement is interesting to me because we live right now in profoundly polarized times. We have conservatives calling liberals people who are suffering from a thought disorder. We have progressives or liberals calling conservatives all kinds of names too. They're basically accusing them of having a thought disorder. The thought disorder is the polarization. The thought disorder is not either the conservatives or the progressives. The thought disorder is the result of us having forgotten America's mission statement. You know, when I ask people, in radio interviews and TV interviews and in addresses that I give, what's America's mission statement? You know that almost no one can answer the question, and those who answer can tell me one part of the mission statement. In fact, America's mission statement is a single sentence, and that single sentence is the preamble of the United States Constitution. That is America's mission statement. And summarizing that very long sentence, it has three main elements. Number one, the Constitution creates a government that is a servant to its citizens. That's radical. In the time that this country came into existence, the model of government that existed predominantly around the world was that citizens were servants to the monarch.
Yes.
The preamble, the mission statement says, this government is a servant to its citizens, not a servant to special interests, not a servant to a specific ideology, not a servant to businesses, to its citizens. And the preamble also mandates the government to function at the intersection of promoting the common good and preserving individual freedom. Conservatives, by and large, in terms of brushstrokes, are the advocates of individual freedom.
Yes.
Progressives, by and large, as a brushstroke statement, are the advocates of the common good. They're both right, and they're both incomplete. And that's why I say the thought disorder is the polarization, not progressives or conservatives.
Fascinating. Excellent. Thank you so very much. Tell us what you mean by true patriotism.
True patriotism, in a nutshell, is living in integrity with America's mission statement.
Okay, and what does that entail?
What that entails is the 5 specific ingredients that I outline in the Integrity Stimulus Plan. Okay. So those 5 elements are life fulfillment integrity, freeing ourselves from a faulty formula for life fulfillment. Second is health integrity, dealing with the unsustainability of our healthcare system as it currently exists that is causing it to be impossible to fund universal healthcare. The third is economic integrity. I don't think that needs any introduction in times when we experience massive economic meltdown directly as a result of massive integrity deficits in the financial sector. And, by the way, in the consumer sector, and, by the way, in the government sector, and, by the way, in the business sector, because we've turned into a debt-ism-oriented economy, not a capitalist economy. We can get back to that if you'd like. The fourth element is citizen integrity, which has to do with ways that we as individual citizens and as corporate citizens, as business citizens rather, and politicians all have a responsibility to function in our lives in a way that matches rather than erodes America's mission statement. And the fifth element is problem-solving integrity, where we move beyond a culture of polarization and ridiculous compromise that doesn't do anything except cover up symptoms rather than deal with root causes, into truly synergistic collaborative problem-solving.
Okay, fascinating. So tell us about the faulty formula for life fulfillment.
The faulty formula for life fulfillment that got us into the mess that we're in financially is the following. Wealth plus lifestyle equals life fulfillment, and in order to attain wealth and lifestyle, it is necessary to compromise integrity, people, and social responsibility.
The end justifies the means.
The ends justify the means, and the ends are this notion of life fulfillment being created by wealth and lifestyle. Now, there's nothing at all wrong with wealth or lifestyle. Those are lovely things. But it's very, very clear to me from studying the people that I have studied who have gotten all of the wealth and lifestyle that they've wanted and more, who have sought me out because they got those goals and they still didn't feel fulfilled. That's what shows me that life fulfillment is based on something else. And what it's based on is living at the intersection of being who we truly are, which is authenticity, and that translates into self-integrity, bonding with others, which is connection, and that translates into relationship integrity, and influencing the world around us, which is impact, and that translates into societal integrity. That's the formula for life fulfillment.
Okay, fascinating. Thank you. So tell us about what's involved in restoring integrity to healthcare in America.
Well, the healthcare problem that we have in this country is really quite stunning. We have essentially the highest cost of healthcare in the world, and one of the worst, in fact, the worst cost-benefit ratio for healthcare in the industrialized world, in the first world. And the reason is because in our country we have focused primarily on the aspect of healthcare that creates the greatest amount of profitability. And that aspect of healthcare is disease or illness management.
Yes.
Disease and illness management is what conventional medicine focuses on primarily. It's prescription medications and surgery. And those things are very important pieces of a much larger healthcare vision. But when we are primarily focused on illness management, as I call it, then we end up creating a culture that is illness-oriented.
Yeah, so what I assume that one of the big things that gets left out with that is prevention, preventing illnesses.
There are three things that get left out from that. Preventing illness, optimal health, and health restoration, which is very different from managing illness. Surgery sometimes can cause health restoration. Medication almost never causes health restoration. It manages illness. But integrative healthcare isn't simply integrating mind, body, and spirit. That's a good start. But what integrative healthcare really involves is integrating preventing illness, optimal health, disease management, and illness restoration. So there are those three other areas.
So please tell us about those.
Well, the most surprising thing about the preventive illness, the illness prevention piece, is that the two most overlooked and most absolutely foundational pieces of illness prevention are food and environment. We live in a society where the food processing industry derives its profits from generating foods that cost the least amount of money and create the most amount of addiction. In fact, foods are commonly have ingredients that are called excitotoxins, which directly cause the craving centers in our brain to get activated.
Yes.
And those additives are acceptable to the Food and Drug Administration. So it's not about, the food industry is the problem. There is no single culprit here. This is a systemic problem.
Yeah.
Not, they're the bad guys and everyone else is fine. The problem's systemic. And what we have to do as our front line for health and for illness prevention is we need to take the food processing industry by its hands, and help it derive the profitability that it is entitled to in a capitalistic system.
Sure.
Through providing the American public with foods that don't destroy health, as a huge percentage of American foods do today,
Yep.
but instead promote health and prevent illness.
For one great example is diabetes, for example. I mean, it's
Absolutely.
It's undeniable that it's diet related. In not all forms, but in one of its most common forms.
In one of its most common forms, type 2, it is diet related, it is weight related. We have a food processing industry that relies on people to be overweight in order for them to make profits.
Yeah.
And adds these additives I was talking about in their foods that stimulate the craving, that creates the overweight conditions that lead to obesity, that lead to diabetes, that lead to a whole slew of other health problems like cardiovascular problems, et cetera, et cetera. The list goes on and on.
Not to mention the whole issue of how prescription drugs, when taken, often cause side effects, as we all know, as we hear about them on television every day, the side effects that are caused by prescription drugs. And then often those side effects require a treatment all onto their own.
With prescription medication, yes, of course there are side effects involved, and of course there can be complications. And there are some people whose health has deteriorated so significantly that it is necessary to bring out the big guns.
Of course.
There are other people who don't have significantly deteriorated health, but they are in an emergency health situation, like they have a severe infection where they really need antibiotics, for example. So prescription medications have their right place.
Yes.
But what they're being used for and what they're being prescribed for is things that they're not designed to do. They're not designed to restore health, and they're not designed for optimal health, and they're not designed for preventive health.
And they're completely utilized in that fashion today.
Precisely. That's a big problem.
That is the mindset of the consumer.
It is the mindset of the consumer, which is being sanctioned by the Food and Drug Administration and the Department of Agriculture, and is being capitalized on by the medical community, the pharmaceutical community, and the food processing community. In the 1950s, there was a big push in American industry to make life simpler for middle-class Americans by giving them access to more for less. And that was a high-minded intention that occurred at a time when we didn't have the science yet to really know, we didn't have the research to really know what these additives we were putting into our foods and our hair care products and our makeup and our soaps and throughout the entire industry. We didn't know what those high-minded intentions were going to lead to.
Yeah.
We know now,
Okay.
but we don't have the will yet to do something about it. But here's the problem. Until we get the will to do that, the cost of health care, which is currently oriented around illness management, will continue to be so unmanageable that the universal health care that is a wise priority to have won't be affordable. I think that what's also very important is that part of optimal health, especially in a climate that we have today where there's so much non-food passing as food, we have to rely on nutritional supplements. We have to rely on integrative health kinds of approaches, mindfulness, meditation, prayer, exercise.
Homeopath, chiropractic.
Exactly. Homeopathy, chiropractic medicine, naturopathic medicine, osteopathic medicine. We have to really do a fully integrative approach in order to compensate for the damage that's being done by destroying the health piece of the environment and by destroying individual health because of our food processing industry's deficits and because of the ways in which prescription medications that are being overprescribed have a hand in destroying health. So we have to have much more of an optimal health orientation than we've had. What that requires is something called health freedom. Any attempts, and there are attempts being made now, to clamp down on and diminish consumer access to things like nutritional supplements, that cannot be allowed. Because it will, if it's allowed, it will continue to contribute to diminished health, and that will continue to cause our healthcare system to be unaffordable. So this is a crucial issue.
Okay.
Health freedom.
Okay, very good. Thank you very much. In the time that we have left, I'd like to give you a chance to talk about achieving sustainable abundance. In other words, the future of our economy.
Yes. Here's what the problem has been. We've actually been operating under a faulty formula for abundance for the past few decades as well. And that faulty formula for abundance has gone like this. It is perfectly acceptable, and not just acceptable, but necessary, to borrow money from an uncertain future in order to finance the appearance of profitability in the present. Now, that formula is not capitalism. Capitalism is creating profitability because you've worked for it and you've attained it because of your efforts in the here and now. What we have replaced capitalism with is a different economic system that's unsustainable. It's called debtism. And debtism is an economic system that is directly responsible for the economic collapse we've gone through. We're going through now a possible, if it's handled right, we're going through a massive correction out of debtism into true capitalism again. But there are a lot of people that are really worried that the massive amounts of spending that are being invested in the name of trying to prevent a complete economic collapse that would cause a worldwide massive economic depression may actually prevent us from returning back to healthy capitalism. So there's a real dilemma going on, and what I would say from the point of view of the integrity stimulus plan is I'm not an economist. I don't know those answers. What I do know is that there are very specific steps that individuals, businesses, and governments can take to restore economic integrity. Individuals need to start abstaining from consumer debt. Beyond responsibly secured home loans and responsibly secured auto loans and responsibly secured education loans, the rest of what goes into consumer debt has to become off limits. Now that may upset a lot of credit card companies, but credit card companies have gotten very wealthy off of massive consumer debt that has contributed to a culture of debtism. And we need to have a government that is absolutely inviolably committed to ultimately, and it'll take a number of decades to do it, but to ultimately eliminating government debt and to, as soon as possible, which I believe can be done within the next 5 to 10 years, have a balanced budget forevermore. The United States could easily reposition itself as the world leader in the economy if it repositions itself based on principles of sustainable abundance and integrity-centered business practices.
Okay, great. Dr. David Gruder, thank you very much for having been our guest. It's really been a pleasure. It's been so educational to have you here. Thank you so much for having been our guest.
Thank you so much for giving me the time on your show.
My pleasure. You've been watching The Defining Moment for creating the culture of conscience. You can find us on the internet at www.definingmoment.tv. Thank you for watching and have a great day.